Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Christine Tao. I'm the co founder and CEO at Sounding Board. We're a dynamic leader platform offering tech enabled coaching and mentoring and program management software. And we also run this, which is a stream we called Leadership Live. It's a series where we talk with some of the most dynamic people and learning leaders. And we get to hear not only more about their work, but a little bit about them personally and the person behind all of the learning that's being delivered. So I'm really excited to be welcoming Josh Remerowski from SRS Distribution to the show today. Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I guess I should also change the name of the company because SRS Distribution was acquired by Home Depot earlier this year, right, Josh?
Yeah, we are officially part of the Home Depot family of companies. We'll still operate as SRS Distribution Inc., which is great, but it's an exciting time and a busy time ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get to hear a little bit about how that's going later. But first, I want to start with what is usually my favorite question of the show, which is to learn a little bit about you and your origin story. So, would love to be able to have you share that. Oh, and I
Sure.
will have our team check. Somebody just wrote that they were not able to hear.
Okay. Yeah. From an origin story standpoint, mine's pretty simple. I would say it's from white trash to white collar. I grew up really poor, and I moved a lot, went to many different schools, and so my parents didn't really focus on education or caring about it. So I always had to like figure out things on my own. And luckily, I had the outlet of athletics, and athletics was always, you had a coach, you had someone that could really be hands on with you, teach you things. And then the great part about sports is you get to apply it immediately, in a game against other people in competition and continuously learn how to get better. And so early on, that gave me this kind of fire and understanding of like, I love coaching, I love developing. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know really if I was ever going to be an adult. And I left college. Probably most of my friends never thought I was going to be an adult either. And I left college becoming a truck driver. So I spent my first 3 years in the workforce as a truck driver doing blue collar things because I grew up in a blue collar low income family, and that's just was the normal thing, and not really understanding that I could maybe do something else or use my brain or skills in a different way. And I did a lot of other jobs like that. I was a field service technician for DirecTV. I did door to door sales and cold calling for small businesses at Comcast.
Yeah.
And then I really, for myself, figured out like, how can I go do something with the things that I'm passionate about and maybe work at a company where I'd have that opportunity. And that's when I went to Verizon and kind of started my journey into HR and training and learning and development. And really, I just caught fire for a passion, in that space since then. And that's where I've spent the last decade of my career, is just learning as much as I can about, the space and trying to help people get as good as they can at their jobs to make their lives easier.
I mean, what an incredible story, Josh. Tell me a little bit about, it's a pretty big leap to go from being out in the field, technician into learning. What was it and how were you able to make that transition?
Well, it was definitely a tough transition. I think mainly because being a truck driver, being a field tech, you have one point of view, right? Your aperture is only open so large, right? So, I experienced the whole like corporates telling us to do all this, and I can't believe they're making us do training to, not get sued or be safe and not die on the job. It's there's such a different mentality, and I lived it. I worked it every day. So like the big thing for me was first like opening my aperture up to like the broader sense of like, how is business run, what matters to people that want to make dollars and cents, to make sure I get a paycheck. How do I actually contribute versus how I felt I contributed. So the first thing was really like just like a huge mind shift, shift and you know, mindset change more than anything.
Yeah.
And once I established that, it became like the journey of like, what do I actually need to learn? to change my career because, I
Mm.
dropped out of college. I became a truck driver. I didn't have any of the education on paper. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I began, when I worked at Verizon, was starting to like talk to other people of like, how did you get to where you are? And
Mm.
then I needed to figure out, based on what they did career experience wise, what
Yep.
they did from a education background, or just maybe books that they were reading, whatever the things that they were doing to personally grow and develop their own skill set. I then created like a personal inventory of the places I was lacking. And then I had to be honest with myself because I was lacking in pretty much everything, right? I didn't know how to present to people. I knew nothing about learning and development. I knew nothing about, HR. As most people that you talk to, when they think of HR, they just think HR fires people. And so I just had all these misconceptions and misnomers that were really how I was operating. So it was a huge shift in operating framework more than anything. And then once I was able to shift that to like truly establish like, hey, I need to change, hey, I need to grow, then I could begin to climb that mountain. And then also understanding that it was going to take time. So, a lot of people, we're in a microwave society. They want everything to happen right now
Yes.
and, immediately. And that is not the reality when you're like myself, when you have no HR experience. All you have is experience doing things out in the field, like driving a truck or installing satellites and internet.
Yeah.
I had never worked in an office in my life after, many years of working even before becoming a truck driver. So I didn't know any etiquette, how to speak to people, how to navigate office politics, any of that. So just a huge learning curve. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, is just completely rewiring my brain to operate in a different way, communicate in a different way, treat people in a different way than how you get treated in a frontline job. A lot of times there's just a whole different, set of rules. So I think that was the big thing for me, is just really changing myself, changing even the people I surrounded myself with. I changed my entire friend circle, and ultimately for me, it completely changed my life. So I think, like, when I say I went from white trash to white collar, like, I could not be any more serious or clear. Like, the fact that I'm here is shocking. In my career in general, and not still driving a truck, and that really came from, I think, more than anything, just being a continuous learner
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
And I mean, how incredible now you get to do that and drive
Yeah.
that for thousands and thousands of people and help them create career mobility, learning experiences, all of that in a different way. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that your background influences the way that you think about how L&D should operate and how what you bring into the types of programs you deliver?
Yeah, I think for me, what I always struggled with is everyone would always give you theories and modality, like different modalities and frameworks, and all these buzzwords is all I felt corporate America was filled with. It still is, quite honestly. It's sometimes it's very, like, you want to take a vacation because of the way people speak in this environment, rather than just being transparent and honest and doing things in simple terms that are inclusive for everyone involved. And so for me, like, being in the jobs that people are always trying to say they want to like set up for success and make their experience better, I've done it. So I know, I didn't even know I had an email for like the first 2 years that I was a truck driver. So when people are like, oh, the front line's not doing X, Y, and Z, it's like, well, are we communicating things? Are we rushing them into the job too fast? Everyone wants frontline workers to get up to speed so quickly, but they're doing nothing to make them get acclimated to working in the company and knowing what's expected of them. And
Yeah.
if we just take, for me, so it's like, how can we pause? How can we make the experience, better by spending some time with them, setting those things about the company, about what to do, what not to do, where things are, rather than just expecting, well, we're just going to burn through this frontline workforce one way or another. Well, most of the times we're burning through because we're doing nothing to make them feel like they matter. So for me, I want every person in our company, no matter what company I work for or support, like, they should feel like they matter every day, that their work matters, and that their voice is heard. So for us, that's really been the focus. And in my job is, what's the actual voice of the customer, the people I serve, which are the people that serve our customers, what are they saying they need? And then how can we do that in a practical sense, right? Not everything's possible within a, a budget, not everything's possible within time or
Right.
resources,
Yeah.
but what are those meaty items that we can go tackle? And that's really where my focus has been, ever since, is truly listening to the employee and, not doing stuff that's just, sounds good because someone wrote a paper or a book on it that's never actually done many of these jobs, and just do the practical, simple stuff that can really help make everyone's experience in a company a lot better.
Is there any specific example you could give about, even something simple and practical that you found works really well, whether it's for frontline workers or even for other employee populations?
Yeah, so I think, one, for frontline workers, if you can just give them some formal training and like take the time where it's facilitated by a human and it's
Mhm.
not fully path. I think the best example I can say is like we give too much passive learning to people, right? We are
Mhm.
a swipe up, swipe left culture. So people are just clicking through next on all this stuff that you shove in their face, and they don't truly know what's important or what to pay attention to. And if we say we're a human first company or a people first company, which all these companies have in their mission, and then they talk to no people for the first however many days or hours of their job, well, what about this is people first? So for me, if you can make the experience, like when I was at Walmart
Yeah.
and I sat through the onboarding experience we were doing there when I started, you would have 30, 40 people in a room, all their backs to each other. No one was talking to each other. They're just all in silence, listening to things through their headphones. And you have to interject some collaboration, some
Yeah.
human intervention when people first start that says, hey, all these things that you said this company was, we are. And so
Mm.
that's really been my focus, is like, what's the right way to create blended learning to where it's not
Yeah.
overly geared any direction and provide balance, and creating like true meaningful experiences when people join a company that reinforces they made the right decision to switch jobs, to switch
Yeah.
careers, to leave their families at home, whatever that looks like. And so really that's all I've ever done, is I look at what's the right balance, what's the right way to approach things, and can you interject some fun into it, because so many things we do are just so stale and quite honestly painful to sit through.
Yeah.
And if I'm struggling, I know other people are struggling, as someone that like knows how the material works and it's supposed to go. So I think you want to find those blended experiences and interject fun. And I've reestablished that in any programs we redesign to bring some human element into a world that we continue to push away from having humans be a part of it. You
Yes.
got to keep some of that in, because people need connection, and they need to be able to collaborate and talk and bounce ideas off of one another. It doesn't have to be the old school where it was hours and hours of that. You just have to find the right mix. And so we're doing that right now. We're redoing our sales onboarding, and that's what we're focusing on, is what should be passive, but where are the moments that matter for a human to be involved and help build the culture, help build the skills, help build the behaviors, and then answer questions that people may have, so that 6 months from now, a year from now, we're not asking, why didn't you know that, or why didn't you do that, or how didn't you know we've offered this benefit, or that we had this resource. It's
Yeah.
because we provided them no one in the process to talk to. So for me, that's like the simplest way to do it. People want other people to talk to and interact with, especially when they're new. They have a lot of questions. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of ambiguity. So I find that simple change is usually where most companies have over-indexed, on the passive learning, the self-directed learning,
Yeah.
and it ends up being a pile of crap for someone else to fix down the line, and it's a long journey to fix those things after a while.
Oh. Well, I think one of the things I noted actually in what you were saying is something that I don't always hear, which is beyond thinking about delivering the content or the learning that someone needs or the training that they need, you're actually also really thinking about that employee experience, and that the training and learning itself is just another experience that's helping them understand the culture, values of that company as well, which I find really distinct. I mean, most people might think, oh, I'm just delivering the training, but it feels like you've got a wider lens.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I talked to my team when I joined SRS specifically is, what experience are we creating for our employees? And if we're not asking that question, then we're just going through the motions like everyone else. It's like, we're a bunch of faceless, nameless people walking down the street past each other with the blue light glowing in their face, like you see every day. A lot of them in their cars, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But what is the experience that we're trying to create? And if you're trying to say, it's fun, it's exciting, we're innovative, and then you just read from a PowerPoint for 4 straight hours and read lists of bullet points, I don't know that you're doing that, right? I don't know that you're creating an innovative, exciting, collaborative thing, all these buzzwords that people use. So if your focus is on how do you make the employee experience great, how do you make it fun, how do you make it match the mission, the vision of the company, then do it. Your say-do ratio should match. So for us, it's, if we say these things, the things that I question my team on and things I question myself will always be, one, why are we doing this? And then, does it create a good experience for the people involved? And if the answer is I don't know, which is what I get a lot when I'm asking, why are we doing X or why are we doing Z? The questions, the answer to that question is always like, I don't know. Well, we need to figure out why. Right. And then if it's not creating a great experience, we need to say, how can we? And most of that time, you need to go get feedback from the front line, from your other core business stakeholders, and be okay where it's going to make other people uncomfortable that they've been doing something the same way for a long time, and that's what they know and that's what they're comfortable with. Risk, experimentation comes with risk. Yes. And I don't know anyone that becomes successful in life without taking risk. So for me, it's, what are those risks that are not career ending that you can go do and implement to create a better experience for everyone? And most of them are not substantial. It's small tweaks that you can make to make things more fun, more engaging, interjecting technology, gamifying things, whatever it is, where you don't need huge, massive budgets, but you can make it to where people don't feel like they've literally just spent the last 3 days of their life at a lecture. And they're talking, at the end of the day, this is why I didn't go to college, was because of stuff like this. And I've experienced that personally as someone going through those kinds of training. So for me, it's about the experience, it's about the people. And we tend to forget that because we always think it's about the bottom line, which it is, but we need to be able to serve these folks well if we say they need development so that they can serve the bottom line. And I think that's a big shift, is where often we put the other thing first and everything else comes second. And if we can just remember to keep the employee at our forethought of like how we're creating, how we're doing, how we're delivering things, you're going to make a lot better experiences for everyone, which ultimately lead to better outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's not absorbed, if it's not, actually taken in and engaged around, it won't have an impact on the bottom line. Right. So I think it's often the case with a lot of areas of development that you do have to think about. It's not just putting it out there, but are you putting it out there in a way where people will actually engage with it and that can actually stick? Well, could we shift gears a little bit? The other thing we had a really interesting discussion about was some of your thoughts around leader development and manager development, and what you are really trying to drive in terms of some of the work that you're doing now at SRS in this idea of like back to basics. And I loved it. And I think it's sort of follows the same thread that we've been talking about here, which is like really simple, straightforward ways to think about your programs. And so would love to have you just share a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think my thought process, kind of as we were discussing, is so many people want, really complex, pie in the sky, things for their leaders, and they want to apply frameworks and like all these structures because they saw something at a conference or online, or they read a book. And I think all that's great, but most leaders don't do the basics well. And I think it's evident if you just are around leaders, if you switch companies like I've switched, through growing my career, you will find each leadership group at each level really struggles with the basics. And fundamentally, what I've found is many leaders just say, "Well, I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing." And what I always challenge them is like, I've played golf with people that have played golf for 20 years, and they stink at golf. So it proves that doing something for a long time does not make you good at it. I know people that have sang and danced and have done all those things for a long time. They're still not good singers. They're still not good dancers. So doing something fundamentally for a long time just does not make you good at it. And I think a lot of times it probably makes you worse at it because you've been doing that with the wrong behaviors and the wrong approaches in the wrong frameworks for 20 years. And so all you've done is just built a mountain of really bad behaviors and really bad, approaches that, you might think is good because maybe you were lucky that the company was successful during that time. And so you attribute the company's success to your success as a leader. And eventually that gets exposed. It gets exposed in employee engagement surveys. It gets exposed when people start leaving the company in droves, through employee relations disputes, whatever that looks like. And so for me, what we've been focusing on specifically, we did this with one of our last leadership development programs that we just reframed, was how do you look inward first as a leader and truly understand, like, what are you even good at? Because I can tell you, I ask a lot of leaders what they're good at, and they can ramble off of things. And then it's like, well, if I go ask your peers or the people that report to you, are you good at those things? Would they agree? And it's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, so are you really good at that? If we're really doing an inventory of the things that we're truly good at, if we're being honest with ourselves, because that's the only way we're ever going to be truly great at leadership. What are those things? What are my special skills? What do I actually bring to the table that's a differentiator? And then the things that I'm not good at, what things am I just never going to be good at? And I need to be focusing on building the right team around me to be good at that. What are the other places I can incrementally get better at? And so we've been focusing on the inward leader. What are your skills, your brand as a leader? What do you want to be known for? And then what are your audacious goals? Some people call them, right, the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, your BHAG. What is it? And if you don't have it, why are you doing this thing called leadership? Because at the end of the day, the thing that we were teaching them, in our program we called Lead Academy, is if you get to the mountaintop and you're alone, you're a hiker, you're not a leader. One of my favorite quotes from John Maxwell, and so many people are climbing mountaintops right now by themselves, calling themselves leaders. And newsflash, if there's no one ascending the summit with you, you're not a leader. You are a hiker. And if you don't have the inventory, of yourself, of your own leadership skills, of your own blind spots to understand why people aren't following you in the first place, you're going to have a lot of lonely hikes, a lot of late nights. And, honestly, for me, I just think that's a miserable way to operate, as a leader, because you have to work 10 times harder just to get things across the finish line because you don't have a willing, enable workforce. So we really focus, on getting back to the basics of understanding and evaluating and challenging the status quo of leadership, and then shifting to, building the other skills that a lot of times people think because someone's been a leader a long time that they have. And one of those specifically is coaching. Like so many people, think because a person's been a leader for a long time, they can coach. And yet again, it just fundamentally is not true. And just because even if you are a good coach, there's always room to get better because the people you're coaching are constantly changing, adapting, evolving themselves, which means your tactics, your approaches, and your ability to coach has to do all those things also.
Totally.
And so we really focus on the basics of that and establishing that, the differences. But it all starts with you. It all starts with you understanding, where your your blind spots, as a leader is, and then understanding like, how am I going to get people to get to this mountaintop with me, not just me climbing, by myself.
Yeah, and I think it's like you had said before, it's not because you should know how to coach, right? It's a skill that has to be learned, and particularly for those of us in corporate offices and environments as a manager, there's a power structure where you are often directing work and
Yeah.
managing performance. And so that natural direction, advice giving is part of your job, which may not come as naturally as coaching. And it sounded like you're trying to even break that apart so people understand that, because people often don't even know the differences.
Yeah. And so the one thing that we're really working towards, and what we've been providing in our regional sales manager academy, our branch manager academy, we just provided in our lead academy as we scale our academy model, is what is the difference between coaching and mentorship, because those aren't the same thing. What's the
Yeah.
difference between mentorship and maybe being a sponsor, like
Yeah.
sponsoring someone for their career and helping them network. And then, there's directive coaching. Many leaders, specifically if you look at like the boomer generation that's moving into retirement age, most of them will tell you they like directive coaching. They want that type of coaching. Um,
Yeah.
Not all, but many will say that. Even with Gen X, to agree, you will see that where they want a lot more directive type coaching. Tell me what to do. I'll go do it. I'll get it done. I'll roll up my sleeves and I will knock this thing out. As you start to shift to the side of the spectrum, when it comes to the demographics of your workforce, people desire more of the collaborative coaching. And you have a lot of leaders that have been very good for years at the directive type coaching. I told you to
Mhm.
go this way, you do it blindly, and you do it great. We have a lot of people now that have been taught to question why
Yeah.
that we're doing something and to ask why we're doing something. And you have leaders that struggle with that as like a power dynamic, when it's not a power dynamic, it's a lack of understanding the different types of coaching and evolving your process to be able to say, how can I lead with the why so that people aren't constantly asking me because I'm not doing a good job of communicating? But then
Yeah.
also know, how can I collaborate to bring this person along the journey? This is why many leaders are getting to the mountaintop alone with some of the younger generations coming into the workforce, because they're not collaborating, they're directing. And they're job hopping because they don't want to work with someone that doesn't want to listen to their ideas, doesn't want to listen to anything they have to say, and make it an inclusive environment where they feel like they're a part of this thing and also a part of the process and a part of the outcome. And so I think you really have to focus on the collaborative. So we focus on the collaborative versus the directive. And my
Mm.
peer has put in a great process for that with our coaching model. And so we've installed that into our programs, and we're going to continue to do that. And then the big thing that we use from Michael Bungay Sainer's book, The Coaching Habit, which is get rid of the advice monster. Like, advice is not coaching. And so many people in leadership positions give advice and think that they're coaching, right? So it really comes down to, how can I listen longer, stay curious longer, ask those questions so that I get the information to help the individual come to the desired outcome, rather than me tell them what the outcome is. Because many leaders do that, and what does the person do? They come back to them the next time to help solve
Yeah.
their problem. And that's when you work for an organization that has a lot of leaders that are saying, people, my team is always coming to me, you have a lack of coaching within that organization. Because if they
Mm.
were coaching, those people would be coming to those realizations on themselves, and then
Yeah.
being held accountable to do so.
Yeah, we have a saying at Sounding Board, it's not about helping to solve the challenge in front of you. It's helping you figure out how to do that so you can continue to solve every challenge that comes in front of you, because we all know things are changing faster and faster, and there's more and more different and new challenges every day, right? And so I think that's really also illustrative of what you were sharing. Well,
Yeah.
Josh, we are actually, I told you it's going to go fast. We're actually already at the end of our time, but I do want to give you just a minute to close and see. We have a lot of folks that are in learning and development or are often looking for ways that they can also forward their own careers and progress, and wanted to see if you had any parting words of advice for them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I took opportunities that I wasn't getting paid extra to do and didn't get the title and all the pomps and circumstances that come along with it. So just be willing to do the work other people aren't willing to do or think they're above that makes impact. Obviously, do things that make impact, and that'll help build your brand as someone that gets stuff done and isn't afraid to raise their hand. And eventually you won't have to raise your hand. Other people will raise their hand for you. And then no one will need to raise your hand. You'll just start getting tapped on the shoulder. So I think just the more you can find those opportunities that don't come with the pay raise and the title change, if you're struggling to get there,
Yeah.
eventually it'll evolve into those things coming naturally. So that's the best advice I can give everyone. That's at least what worked for me, and it's helped me really grow my career tremendously over the last decade.
Amazing. Well, Josh, thank you so much again for joining us. And I really learned a lot. And again, loved your story and hearing. And that certainly resonated with a lot of folks on the line as well. So thanks again.
Thanks, Christine.
Bye. Bye, everyone.